Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. We will wait some minutes in order to other participants will join, and then we will enter in the first session of our upskilling training program for vet professionals. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, Elena, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Rossella. Hello, good morning. Thank you for joining.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We are going to start in 2 minutes, so we are waiting still for some participants.
Se le vai fermo queste due. Perché che chitarri.
So I think we can start. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being on time and for participating to our upskilling program for vet professionals. We are going to deliver under the framework of the Exceed project. Before entering in the core of the session, I will briefly introduce the Exceed project, that is a partnership for excellence project. Exceed means excellence in green and digital manufacturing, and the project aims to establish a center of vocational excellence in Europe to support the sustainable green and digital transition of the advanced manufacturing sector in 5 European countries: Italy, Czech Republic, Finland, Spain, and Greece. The project will have an overall duration of 4 years. We are now under the implementation of the core of the project after 1.5 years, more or less, of the overall implementation of the action. And this training program for vet professionals is one of the most important action we have to develop in order to support the skilling process and the increase of the overall responsiveness of the vet system. The main aim is to innovate the vet system also through curricula innovation, introduction of new services, supporting services for youngsters and adults willing to improve their skills and to select, let's say, to follow personal and professional development path in the advanced manufacturing sector. This first session will have an overall duration of 2 hours, will be completely online, it will be recorded, and all the supporting materials will be shared later on to all participants through our Exceed website and the page dedicated to the training program we are following today all together. We will discuss today about eco-digital transition, what means and what implies to, let's say, move towards so-called digital circular economy, what this implies for vet professionals and vet providers, let's say, directly responsible for the design and development and delivery of innovative curricula, supporting, let's say, the sustainable competitiveness of the advanced manufacturing sector. We will discuss about all these topics with an international keynote expert, that is Dr. Richard Puckett. Thank you very much, Richard, for being with us today. Thank you for your availability. And before giving the floor to our keynote expert of today some very simple rules. So please keep your microphone off. For any need, use the chat. We are here to support you in case of any need. This means technical needs or also questions that you may have during the delivery of the session itself. We will have a 10-minute break ongoing and also final Q&A session, let's say, to interact with our experts. All the materials we will share later on through a follow-up email, so no problem to access presentations and recording, as I said. Considering that the session will be recorded, if you don't want to keep your camera on, you can, of course, decide what you prefer. Last but not least, if you need to start up subtitles in the different languages, you can go in your menu, team menu, button other, and let's say language and transcriptions, and select to activate subtitles. Thank you very much for being with us today once again, for your timely participation. And Richard, please, the floor is yours. Introduce yourself, and then let's start with our discussion together. Thanks, please.
Good. Thank you very much. My name is Richard Paget, and I'm a Professor of Sustainable Development with the United Nations University for Peace. My background is in environmental sciences and climate change, and I've had the privilege of working in about 185 different governments, different countries and governments around the world. So when I speak, I'm drawing my full experience of what I've seen and heard. Some things I might say you may find challenging, but that's fine, because that's the nature of training, of teaching, is to always challenge, and we're always learning. I'm always learning. So I'm going to share my screen to the presentation. And I'm just going to ask Elena to confirm that everything can be seen.
Yes, everything is working perfectly.
Fine. And I am able to be heard by everyone. Is that correct?
Yes,
I'll
yes,
take
it's
that
correct.
silence as yes. Very good.
Yeah, of course.
Very good. So I'll take a break for 10 minutes, as Elena said, at some suitable point. It may not necessarily be exactly on halfway, but it will be when I think we've come to a suitable pause. As Elena mentioned, excellence in green and digital manufacturing is Exceed, an EU project, and it's using some interesting terms: digital eco-innovation. And this is a relatively new term. It's fairly self-explaining as to what it means. And the important thing is that it's trying to boost the durable competitiveness of the advanced manufacturing sector. Notice I used durable and not sustainable. I'm going to explain that a little bit later on. Well, perhaps I'll explain it now. We often misuse sustainable because it's very difficult to be sustainable, because sustainability has got a timeline where we cannot affect future generations. And our actions now very often affect future generations, even though we say something is sustainable for us in this generation. I'll give you an example. Back in the 18th century, Great Britain stopped the slave trade, but it compensated all the slave owners. We only finished paying the bill for those slave owners in 1986. It took us 200 years to pay the bill. And all that time, through dozens of generations, we had this loan that we were having to repay. That affected our government over the past 200 years, and quite recently, of being able to do what it wanted to do because it had a large bill to pay. So we always have to think that sustainability has got a timescale to it. And often when people use the word something is sustainable, they really mean it's resource efficient, using minimum resources, which is itself a good thing, of course. However, we mustn't get carried away that that is actually good into the future, because we are not always aware of that. So if I look at this slide, this is a very simple sustainability indicator. And if an organization answers any of these questions with a yes, then it's not sustainable. So will the proposed business or action exceed the rate of soil regeneration? To do that, you'd need to know about the effects that your business has on soil before you can answer it. And if you can't answer that question, then you have to put a yes, and that means it's not sustainable. And we can look at there's various other things that can be used. So most things, when people say this is sustainable, I'm developing a sustainable business, it's almost guaranteed not to be. It may be a very efficient business. It may be doing as much as it can right now, but it can't be absolutely certain it's sustainable because it doesn't look at all the parameters of sustainability. We also have within the project an eco-innovation observatory. Observatory is a wonderful word. It actually means looking at the stars. It comes from the Latin, but our generation has really hijacked it to mean it's really a centre for something, but it doesn't sound as glamorous, so we say observatory. That's not to diminish its abilities, but we sometimes need to innovate, which is another one I'm going to talk about. We need to innovate. We need to constantly update ourselves and change to make things exciting and to make sure that we are still relevant to what we want to say and what we want people to hear. So when we say that digital eco-innovation is an innovative application, it may be today, maybe tomorrow, it may not be next year. We don't know that. So we always need to bear in mind that innovations have time limits. They last for only certain amounts, and then they need to rejuvenate, to go on. But the essential message is that digital eco-innovation is about applying digital technologies to reduce the use of resources. And that can be the materials, it can be energy, water, land, and also to reduce the emissions that we produce in the production of our products and services. And we all produce emissions in one way or another when we carry out our business. Even if we're traveling on public transport, which is possibly better than a car use, depending on the circumstances, we're still producing emissions of some sort in the life cycle of the transportation that we're using. So we always have to be conscious that there's no perfect solution. We just do the best we can. And what we're trying to do is to move away from the top, the linear economy, where we gather our materials together, we then put a design together, we make it, and then people buy it, and then they throw it away. We're trying to make it into a circular economy where we design something for minimal waste. We design it to be able to be its components to be reused or remanufactured. We manufacture it with a minimal waste, perhaps utilizing 3D printing or artificial intelligence to optimize the amount of energy and materials, water that we're using. And of course, in the consumption, we're trying to make it easy for people to consume whatever it is that we've done, but also to return the product back, or to replace the product, or to replace components in the product. So a long time ago, you remember the kettle, which we boil our water in to make our morning coffee. One time, many years ago, we could take a kettle apart and we could replace all the components. We could keep the kettle going for years because it was replaceable. We could replace bits of it. And of course, that's harder these days, where once the element goes, you can't get at it to replace it. And the plug is sealed, so it's difficult to change the fuse in it. So we need to be aware that sometimes the old practices, which may not be very glamorous, were actually far better at doing what we're trying to do now than we currently do. We also need to design for maintenance, to make sure it's easy to maintain something, whether it's a car or whether it's a kettle. So the circular economy is not about looking after the waste at the end of the process. It's right from the beginning, from the design. Of course, when we come to the waste, we want residual waste. We don't want masses of it, because we can use that waste, perhaps, and I will mention that in future, but that's not the aim. The aim is to recycle everything and keep things going in a circle, and thereby using less raw materials than we need to in a linear economy. So the purpose of this 2-hour training session is to explain all the principles that underpin the circular economy and how digital technologies can help. I think we're going to be influenced in unknown ways by artificial intelligence. It's rapidly gaining pace. It is potentially a threat, of course, but it also has huge and profound benefits to humanity. And that is already beginning to show. So these are the topics I'm going to go through during the next couple of hours: a definition of the circular economy and its principles, the concept of digital eco-innovation, looking at current practice, optimizing the use of natural resources, and so on. So circular economy, to give it a formal definition, it's a model of production and consumption which involves sharing and leasing and reusing and repairing, refurbishing and recycling of existing materials and products for as long as possible. It won't be forever, but it can be much as long as possible is achievable. And we have pillars of the circular economy. We could have a pillar is the kind of glamorous word that we're using at the moment, but it could be the 7 components of the circular economy. It could be the 7 sections of the circular economy. And I think when we're doing our teaching and training, we're trying to innovate, to energize, to make things interesting to the audience by using interesting words, perhaps in new ways. And I think we should always look at our training materials and constantly re-engineer them so they are current. So this is the 7 parts of the circular economy. One doesn't need to start in any particular place, but if we look at materials, we've got to try to get as much value out of a certain amount of material as possible. And to do that by being able to repair it, to be able to reuse it, to break it back down, to remake it, using the materials as much as possible. Using energy, of course, from renewable sources, where possible. That isn't always possible, depending on where we are located and depending on the kind and nature of our manufacturing base. But where possible, we need to look at using renewable sources. Of course, the traditional powers the traditional power sector is going to change towards renewable, but not everywhere in the world, and at different rates too. We saw at the Conference of the Parties, COP29, which is where the heads of government meet and a whole host of other people meet in different countries around the world at the end of each year. We've just had the one in Baku in Azerbaijan, where they are trying to reduce the amount of oil and gas that's being used and increase the amount of renewable energy and adapt to all the problems that we face through climate change. And as we have all seen, and as we see at the end of each year, the aspirations have never been met, and it's always been relatively disappointing. It's foreseeable. If one holds a meeting like that in a petrostate, like we have for the last 2 years, then it's inevitable that there will be pushback on the speed at which we can go to renewable energy entirely. And if we go too fast, governments will argue, well, we're going to become uncompetitive until renewable energies are at scale to be able to be economic, which they are gradually. They'll be uncompetitive with other countries' products and other places. So energy is what we're trying to achieve is a renewable source for our business. Water needs to be extracted at a sustainable rate, which means a rate that can be replaced without affecting future generations. We want to recover as much as possible. We don't want to use virgin water all the time. We want to extract the water from our processes and re-inject it and keep it going as long as possible. In terms of biodiversity, this means animals and plants in their habitats. It can be local biodiversity. It can where your business is sited. It could be biodiversity where your products are sold or where your products their raw materials come from. It's both a global and a local concept. And biodiversity as a concept is under threat everywhere. There's good evidence for saying that commercial fishing will be over by 2050. That's not very far away. That's within the lifetime of every one of us attending this meeting. No more fishing. Maybe on a small scale, but if the large factory ships keep on fishing at the rate they are, it is unsustainable. It has been unsustainable for years, and it's very difficult to get regulation in place and enforced because countries cheat. And there are many examples of that. We need also to look at society and culture, because it's not just about producing our products at a good rate for sale, about using the materials wisely and energy, using wind power or solar or whatever it might be, but it's also the effect that we can have as a business and as teachers on society and culture, ensuring that we try to optimize the social governance benefits of whatever we do, wherever possible. We also need to ensure the health and well-being, not of the people consuming our products, but also of the workers who are producing the products. And that's a very hot topic right now. And of course, we're wanting to try to look at value, not just the lowest price of a product or a service, but the value of it to people, what else they get from it, rather than the cheapness of it. So to start doing that, there are several things that we can look at that are fairly obvious that we have to do. We have to rethink how we do our business, rethink how we make our product or we deliver our service. Complete rethink. Not just tinkering at the edges, not just buying an electric car to go to business meetings. it's not as simple as that. We have to rethink the whole thing. In terms of waste reduction, we have to design for efficiency. So we don't just treat everything at the end of the pipe where the waste comes out. We don't want waste there in the first place. We have to redesign it out as far as possible. We have to extend the product life cycle as far as possible by reusing all the materials that we use as far as possible, by giving the options for products to be returned so they can be broken down and reformed. BMW, for instance, have been doing that for quite some time. They are able to take apart their cars and recover the components, but you have to get the car to them in Germany. So that needs to be thought through. It's not as easy as it sounds sometimes to be that efficient. And we want to recycle wherever possible. Now we know about plastic bags, and we can use paper bags as we have to think of where those paper bags are coming from, whether that's sustainable in itself, durable in itself. But the idea is that we close the loop, so what goes in does not come out other than the product, and that we keep the materials within the cycle as far as possible. And lots of people have an option to assist in this. So when we're training, we have to think, what can our trainers do? What can I do as a trainer to try to inspire people to do something, to be better? The first thing is, and this is for all of you, you have to try and do it yourself. You have to live. And I'm not going to be a tree hugger. I'm far from a tree hugger, I can assure you of that. However, one needs to be able to do as much of good things as possible. It may not be straightforward. It may not be easy, but that's if it was that easy, we wouldn't be here today. It's not easy. And so we have to try to take the first steps ourselves as trainers. We have to look at our lifestyle. And I know what you're thinking. Hold on, he's worked in 185 countries. Now, he didn't walk there. And you're right, I didn't walk there, I flew. And that has been a constant struggle in my career. And many years ago, before carbon offsetting became a thing, and there are questions about it, I thought about it, and there's a balance between trying to create my knowledge so that I could share, and actually it's very difficult to get information out of different governments. It's why agreements are never reached in big summits, because governments work in very different ways to what we might think. We have a mindset that everyone thinks like us, our governments. You'll think of your government in Finland or in Czech Republic or in France or Belgium or the UK, and we think, yeah, it's a version of that. It isn't. It isn't. It's most of the world is not Eurocentric. We're from Europe, and most of the world neither thinks or has a perspective of the world like us. We're all different. And that's why I try to get my information. And what I did is I have a long-term lease with the government of Burkina Faso many years ago. And I have a social enterprise where I created the first all-woman NGO in the country. I used women because men can't be trusted as much, I'm afraid, to do something like this. And I use women because they are great partners. And I found a village, in a remote village, that could only be reached by motorbike or bike horse. I chose a motorbike. And they had unproductive land, which they never used. It was traditional land. We talked about climate change through interpreters, and the government was there both at municipal level, so it was completely transparent, and we had an agreement. And at the rainy season, they collected seeds of indigenous trees and they planted them. And there is now a forest that has been growing up with the intention of offsetting my own emissions. And I expand that forest as time goes by. It serves a few other things. Because it's in the Sahel, it helps to hold back soil degradation. It's increasing biodiversity. It does a few other. It has some added value. So that's how it's not great. It's not perfect. And one day I'll have to stop soon, probably. Because it's not sustainable to keep on taking land for that purpose. But it was the best that I could do. But I store water. I have rainwater harvesting. I use solar panel. I grow as much food as I can. I got rid of my car, which is very inconvenient. I can tell you, it's not easy to do. But you have to do some stuff which is painful. And I use a motorbike. I still ride a motorbike. I had one as a student, and I've still ride bikes. And I use public transport wherever, and it is inconvenient because we're in a transitional stage. The circular economy is transitional. But as role models, all of us have to do the best we can with the abilities that we can. And we use all sorts of excuses. And when we came out of COVID in the UK, people immediately started flying everywhere because they felt entitled to a holiday because they'd gone through lockdown. And we saw a surge of emissions after the COVID event. And people, as our economies that had shut down, we transitioned back to full-blown, let's use everything that we can and do what we want. And all our emissions came back. It's hard to do. And so it's the same for a circular economy. It doesn't happen overnight. It is hard, especially for existing businesses, to retrofit. It's both expensive and it's hard to do. Much easier from scratch, from a blank sheet of paper. But as role models, we as trainers, we have to inspire people to try to do the best they can. We also need to look for role models in businesses, in the sector, who can do it and demonstrate leadership. And again, that's not easy. It takes a mindset as much as finance. We need to identify the roles and responsibilities within an organization. Everybody has a role to play in the circular economy. It's not the person who designs the product. It's not the person who is pressing buttons on a computer screen, controlling a process. It's every single person, including the people that maybe clean the office at night, that come round or come round the factory at night. And I can tell you one thing, if you look at a big company that has a big waste recycling program, and it's very proud how it segregates all its wastes in the offices and on the factory floor into several bins of different stuff. When you go to audit, if you ever have the opportunity to train auditors, tell them to go at 3 o'clock in the morning. Tell them to go when there's no one there, except the cleaners, to see if they understand that segregation. Because I went to a very, very large oil company that had got very, very glamorous fact sheets and handouts, and it was brilliant. We had 7 different bins to segregate everything that we did. But at night, the cleaners came in, they emptied all the bins into one bin, and then that went down into the basement, it went into a skip, and off it went, desegregated. And until we carried out the audit late at night, when only the cleaners were there, because the cleaners had never been told. No one thought they were important. And everyone in an organization in a circular economy is super important because they have a role to play. Everyone. There has to be a vision that can be promoted. Everyone needs to get that. It's no point telling the directors of a company or the people in the factory floor, this is our vision. It has to be everyone, including the cleaners and people who are perhaps in the canteen making the meals, making sure, of course, that we're using products that have and food that has not traveled around the world where possible. In fact, not using food that's traveled around the world, full stop. We have to get out of the habit of doing that, even though we feel perhaps a bit of entitlement to that. But we have to have a strategic vision. You can't just press a button and say, right, we're going to do a circular economy now. We're going to replace, we're going to reduce 30% less water. We'll replace our energy with renewable sources. Job done. No, it hasn't. We have to think of the whole thing. We need the vision. And everyone has to be aware and transparent. We have to be able to check everything. We need people who facilitate that. We need people who can make the connections, who can communicate with the right people, who understand how to get across messages to people, all the stakeholders that are involved in a product and in the business. So the stakeholders are both within and outside the business. The customers are a very important stakeholder. They need to be engaged. They need to understand why what they used to have wrapped in plastic is now wrapped in some form of paper. They need to understand what it is. They need to understand that they must recycle it or reuse it for something else. We need to think about scale as well. Circular economy, we need to be able to scale it so that it is economically viable. We can't do the right thing if we go bust. So we have to understand that. And then we have enablers, people who make it happen, often at government level, the regulators. So if you ever get the opportunity to train people at government level, then get the message across that they are actually so important, because people, humans, we cheat when we think we can get away with it. The mindset, the belief systems of an organization are not what's on the directors' doors and on the walls of vision and so on. It's what people do in an organization when no one's looking. That defines the vision and the company. And the most important person in a company, is it the directors? No, not always. It could be the people at reception. The people coming into a business, the person they first meet. And that person they first meet should not be looking at a mobile phone. They should not be playing a game of solitaire on their laptop. They must be fully engaged all the time and be able to talk about the company as if they're the director. They need to own it. And in the same way, the circular economy needs to be owned by everyone. We need to constantly innovate, not today, but tomorrow and the day after. Constantly look at what we do to try to do better, to do something more efficiently, to try to reduce the amount of resources that we're using. And we need data for that. We can't know we're doing that unless we measure what we do. And that's also important. So we need political will of the government. And you'll see, I mean, the UK government is a classic example. It sets its targets and then it rolls back the dates when it will become net zero, when it will become all electric vehicles. We keep pushing it back and back because there are many external features. And in fact, if we go to net zero, I think it's now by 2050, which is only 26 years away. It's impossible to achieve, but that's what it's saying. But the UK produces 3% in absolute terms of the overall emissions to greenhouse gases, just 3%. If we went to zero tomorrow, by the time I finish my talk today, we'll have killed the economy and we won't have made any impact on the overall amount of greenhouse gas, because 3% is within the noise of the models that we use to determine emissions and trajectories. It makes no difference. That's not to say we shouldn't do it. We should do it because it's right. Absolutely. But we can't all live in a cave, and there aren't enough caves to go around. And I have something in common with President Xi of China. he and I know something about caves. When he was a 15-year-old, he went to live with some relatives in a cave. He was a princeling, and they wanted him to go and understand what it's like to live in a cave. We don't all have that benefit. I live near caves. When I was growing up, cave dwelling was still a thing in the last remaining valley where people were living in caves. And I can tell you, it's not glamorous. It's not great. You don't have electricity. You don't have running water. You cook on an open fire. I mean, it sounds glamorous and it sounds wonderful. It isn't really. So, and we don't have enough caves for the whole of the UK to go and live in them. So we have to have stuff which produces emissions. And that's the same of any country. And of course, the events of a country determine what it will do. So we might have the desire and the aspiration in the government to do the best that we can and create targets. But I'm sure in France right now, they're not thinking about net zero. They're not thinking at all about circular economy. They have other things to think about, not least of which is the current situation in Ukraine as well, which affects the amount of money that countries have to be able to invest in order to generate a circular economy. And so there's lots of things that the circular economy, while it's aspirational, we want to try and do it, but there are external factors which hold us back. And there's also, we need to use NGOs, social, cultural aspects. We need to get people to change. And I do stuff on, of course, globally, but also I work in my local village for decades, literally decades, 20 years, to try to teach them about turning off the lights, to reduce the temperatures of the rooms, to wear an extra layer, to walk within the village, which is entirely possible because it's only a few thousand people and it's quite compact, to do all those things. And there's a limit to which people will go. But I want to go on holiday, go to Wales. No, I want to go to France. I've earned it. There's an entitlement. It's very difficult to take ordinary people just going around their lives, getting on with their stuff, raising their families, trying to do, what they can under pressure, paying bills, hard times, to try to think about something which is a benefit to the planet. That doesn't resonate. It doesn't resonate with that many people. I should think out of a village of 4,000 or 5,000, maybe 200 have done the best they can. But after that, we're locked into electricity provided on the national grid. So we can't do it any further because we're controlled by that. Our water is supplied by a national water company. We can't do that. We don't have a great amount of land. We don't have large gardens, so we can't grow our own food. So there's constraints externally, but we have to do what we can. And so when you're doing your training and you're thinking about this and telling them about all the theory, which I'm going to do with you, I have in the back of my mind that you won't be able to deliver all of this. You'll have to think about the people that are in front of you and make it resonate in terms that are sensible. There's no sense in trying to save the planet if a company goes bust and it throws its workers, maybe 9 people, families depend on them, throws them out of business. It makes no sense. And we also need to engage technological stakeholders, make sure that the technologies that are coming are fit for purpose, and make sure the apps and so on that we're using work for us. And there's lots of small companies that can produce lots of small apps that can do very useful stuff. It doesn't have to be the big companies that we hear about. So, community-based, citywide, national level, international, the idea of circular economy is at all levels, and every level has to play its part. We have to start small and grow, but we also have to have national governments participating too. We have to look at what people and what organizations can do. Are they participatory? Can they empower people? Is that their mission? Do they deliver services? Do they deliver healthcare? Can they get messages across during their normal daily work? Can they improve the way they do their daily work? How do they get there? How do they travel there? And look at charitable organisation for funding to bring in the money to be able to change to a more circular economic way. So when it comes to it, we have to rewire the economy. We have to look at budgets that government has. It will look at its budgets and it will say, well, we can't afford that. We look at infrastructure. You know, in the UK, the trains are what they were. We're bringing in new trains, but that costs money. We have to look at our network system. We tried building or designing a new high-speed road rail from the capital in London to the north, and it's been scaled and back and back and back by successive governments, and it still isn't there. Yet the Chinese can produce super trains and networks hundreds of kilometers a year. But that's because they can order things to happen. And that's the difference between trying to develop a circular economy within a ecocentric framework, within a democratic framework, versus an autocratic framework where you can order things to happen. So we have to be conscious that sometimes the infrastructure that's around us cannot be dealt with unless it is replaced. And that's got a huge capital cost in some cases. Just to put in solar panels may be beyond the capacity of a local family, even if they want to do it, unless they get a subsidy from government. So getting people to do the right thing themselves and businesses to do the right thing themselves requires both funding, but also regulation, because of its own, people will not take that leap. They need that regulation to force them, to encourage them, and there need to be tax incentives and so on. And all this costs money. All this is difficult. It's never been easy, and it's not easy now in today's political and geopolitical world. The businesses, they've got to look at how they can bring on new systems. They may have printing presses and other machinery that is very old, but very repairable. It can be repaired easily. There are people, there are fitters who can take apart a machine and rebuild it, and it will keep working, and they keep it going. But it may not be the most efficient because it's part of a new process which may not have room for this old-fashioned machinery, which is functional, but it's had its day because it stops the circular economy process from fully functioning. So we need to look at systems. We need to look at how businesses get their technical support, because we can't expect businesses to be experts in everything. We can't expect trainers to be experts in everything. I'm constantly not expert in anything, really. I just talk about things, but I bring in experts to help me on specific things. It needs funding, but businesses need funding to help. And also the market has to be there. We can't produce the most efficient and the most sustainable, in the real sense of the word, product if people don't want it. If they want if it doesn't look like what they want, if it looks like it's been handmade and people want something shiny and glamorous but to fit their perceived lifestyle, they're not going to buy it. We need to look at civil society. We need to look at access to communities. We need to use NGOs wherever possible. They're all part of the circular economy. So that it's not just about business. It's not just about government, but also it's about donor agencies. And this is a conundrum here in circular economy because, of course, donor agencies have got great potential to help get change in other countries where possible. But as you know, donor agencies have their own troubles in being able to, in their way they do their business and why they're doing their business in foreign countries. And arguably, a lot of some charitable organizations actually reinforce poverty in countries where poverty prevails. I know that we always produce huge amounts of cash in Europe for disasters, and we help people with humanitarian crises. And that in itself is a good thing, that humans should help other humans. However, if you go to these countries and look at them with a magnifying glass, and this is where my international travel comes in, I see that, and I look at their their budgets. I can see that the amount of money, for instance, that's given from the UK government to Uganda for AIDS relief and health is equivalent to the amount of money that Uganda spends on rocket-propelled grenade launchers. Governments have treasure. Governments have money. They choose not to use it in some cases because agencies in Europe and America, Canada, Japan, and Australia, they know that we'll step in. They'll know that we'll man up and we will do what's right, and they take advantage. And so sometimes we perpetuate poverty and hardship in countries when we're trying to help. A good example is every year there's a monsoon in Bangladesh. It's regular. Well, actually, it's not as regular as it used to be because it comes and goes now according to the climate change. However, it comes every year at some stage, and it creates havoc. It always does. And it's a real problem because a huge amount of Bangladesh goes underwater, and there's a humanitarian crisis. And we all step up and we give money to help, tents and so on. However, Bangladesh has got a space program. And one might ask the question, in a pure financial way, why is Bangladesh spending money on the space program? Because India is, of course. Why is it doing that when it could be preparing its own populations and its own citizens for what will come every year? It won't, because we've got the UK, which has had long ties, of course, not always for good reasons, with Bangladesh, and they know that we step up and we pay. So we have to recognize that sometimes there's huge amounts of things that we do which don't always create the right effects in the long term. And this is where sustainability comes in. We have to think long term. So the donor agencies have a role to play in rewiring the economy of countries, but those countries have to be have to want to accept that. And currently, that's not always the case. So the role of key stakeholders in circularity, NGOs, I've talked about some of this. They have to champion it as much. They have an opportunity to do that. We have to multiply. As trainers, you know this. You train the trainer, you train the trainer, and the trainer trains the trainer, and you multiply your messages. And NGOs are a multiplier. They can help. And often they're working in communities. It may be that they're there year after year and continually give out the messages. I still do in my village. I might have been doing it for 20 years, and I'll try and do it for another 20 years. And sooner or later, we will get there. But it is time consuming, literally. In government, we need to engage policymakers and want policy change to help us. So as businesses, we need to be part of chambers of commerce. We need to be part of trade organizations in order to get the policy change that helps both NGOs to do their work, businesses to do their work, and the consumer to do its work in buying the right products and not wanting cheap goods. We have to align incentives with what we want to achieve. And we need to also show value in terms of socially driven innovation. We need to support social causes. Government can do that. Business can also do that. and it needs to embrace sustainability wherever it can. Just being resource efficient is not sustainable, but it needs to look at the whole process of where it gets its raw materials from. And it's very hard, I know, because I'm sure that everyone I'm speaking to today, like me, has got a mobile phone. And I'm sure it's not a Nokia with minimal, and I know there are people here from Finland, not a Nokia with minimal ability. I've still got a Nokia. It's great for sending, calling and texts, which is what I only did for a long, long time. And I resisted the need to think I wanted apps. And then I discovered it's actually very difficult for me to book a flight, book a train ride, book a service for my motorcycle. It became harder and harder. And so I had to buy a mobile phone. And now I have pages and pages of apps. But that mobile phone comes at a cost. I'm aware of it, but that doesn't mean the cost of it is any less. I know that it's using certain components where it may be that human rights are questionable in the production of the raw materials that make those components. And I know that, but knowing that is not enough. So I try to do whatever I can. And so I've been to DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I talked to government about legislation. I've tried to impress upon them about child labour and what's going on there. I'm working on a project right now with a company that is trying to develop its mine without child labour and trying to do it resource efficiently. Right from they're designing the business from the word go, but it's not easy for them to do because they are within a business landscape where nobody else does that, and so they might stand out, but at a cost. And it's whether their business model can sustain that cost, and they need the support of their government. Their government in the Democratic Republic of Congo, as I know personally, is under duress. It's in the capital. There's not so much government outside the capital. It's less and less, and we go to traditional government, and that's much more that doesn't understand some of the practices that we would propose. And one has to work at that level. We have to train up NGOs. So this stuff, we have to think very hard about everything that we do. A circular economy means we really have to look at everything. And the finance, none of this, it comes free. If it comes free, I wouldn't be here today. You wouldn't be here today. There'll be no need for you, no need for me. It costs money, and it costs money in the long term. There needs capital. And the problem is that we have to take capital by borrowing. We have to repay that. And we have to look at how long the life is of that loan so that we don't put it onto future generations. We have to look at innovative ways in which we structure our business in terms of finance. So we need to look carefully at the role of NGOs. I've spoken about that quite some depth, so I'm going to skip those two. So it's about raising awareness, and that's what you do. That's your job, to raise awareness. You have to build capacity. That's your job again. You're building capacity every time you give a training. I'm hoping I'm building capacity today by sharing some of this stuff with you. It may be that you already know this. Some of you may know this or know parts of it, and that's fine. We need to know that we're all in this together, as it were. We need to foster partnerships. We don't work in isolation. So I've just come back from Nigeria last night, and I was there, and I'd been training the Nigerian climate change negotiators who went to Baku in November. I've been training them on negotiation, on how to get what they needed there. And so we have to foster partnerships. We have to go and help. And I brought in experts on this so they could put it into the right language that everyone understood. And so we have to look at trainers. We don't just put up a slideshow, make everyone feel good for a couple of hours and then go away. We foster a partnership, and I have a partnership in this regard with Exceed. We need to think of, right at the beginning, of course, of design. And of course, we've seen the new Jaguar, I expect, that was recently launched, partly because a lot of people didn't like the look of it, and a lot of people thought it was very innovative. But it depends how innovative they've been. And we're finding that out as time goes by. Hopefully, it's all electric, of course, and but it's trying to capture the mood by being like nothing else. It doesn't look like a Jaguar, for which it got a lot of criticism. It's been very bold. It's a whole business which could be sunk overnight. It's a gamble, and businesses take gambles every day, and sometimes they need to do the right thing. I'm not saying having a pink Jaguar is the right thing, because it will still cost less on my motorbike to go from A to B than it will in one of those, even by electricity, because my motorbike uses so little fuel. But I'm going to have to change that too, because once unleaded petrol goes, my motorbike won't work, and I will change to an electric one, because I have to go to the train station in order to catch a train. So there are trade-offs, of course. Consumption, we have to educate people on buying our product that's good. And the Jaguar has obviously started on awareness, a campaign, and we'll be hearing about it. It has to set up a maintenance program so that it's not so clever that it can't be maintained by having to take it back to wherever it was manufactured. It's got to be able to be taken apart and reused. It's got to be able to be recycled. Has all that been taken account? We don't know yet. All we've seen is a few fancy photographs, which look glamorous and they look innovative and it looks wow. It depends what the price is. It depends whether they fit all the criteria that we want from a circular economy produced Jaguar. We don't know if they have a circular economy even. So there are lots of strategies for the circular economy. We've got to look at durability and repairability. We've got to be able to repair. We have to look at lifetime extension. We have to be able to get more and more life out of everything that we do. We can't, even with laptops, the thing I'm looking at right now while I speak to you, it has a lifespan. It becomes too small. It doesn't have capacity. I have my very first laptop from 1994, and it had 250 megabytes on its hard drive. That's one photograph in today's money. But I did everything on that laptop: PowerPoint, Word, Excel, photographs, presentations, absolutely everything for 2 years. And that was because all the programs had been written with very minimal space, because that was what it was then. But as our capacity for having larger and larger hard drives has expanded, then people have become more creative. I couldn't even load one slide of this presentation onto my original laptop. I have no means to access it anyway, because it doesn't have any ports, because we used a floppy disk, which was a circular disk that we put in a drive, and to show things. We've moved on. So we have to bear in mind that we can only extend products for so long. We have to be as efficient as possible. And very often, when people say that they are sustainable, they really mean, in most cases, just in case there is one example that isn't, resource efficient. They use water, they use energy, they use their materials efficiently as possible, but they'll need to innovate to keep that. They'll need to reuse, they need to share in partnerships. We're not isolationists these days. We need to recycle and recover, reduce waste, and all the other good stuff that we've spoken about today. So the three principles are: we eliminate waste and pollution, we circulate products and material, and we regenerate nature as the added value as a sustainable enterprise. So I've spoken about the concept of circular economy, digital concept of digital innovation is coming, some examples, some optimization, use of natural resources, and how to reduce harmful substances. That's coming next. I definitely need a break, and I'm sure you do too. So I'm going to suggest that we take a 10-minute break, and I will come back in 10 minutes. It's now, I'm having to make sure, it's now 10:34 CET. So 10:35 CET. So I will come back at 10:45 CET. I'm in the UK, so I'm having to just check my time zones here. So I'll come back in 10 minutes at 10:45. Thanks so much so far.
Fine, thank you. See you in a while. Have a good break.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much.
Skutecznie. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Could I just check, Elena, that you can hear me still?
Yes, I can hear you, Richard.
Okay, good.
So everything is working fine. So also from a technological point of view, let's say, because we are a lot of people today. So
Yeah, good. Get myself back to, there we are. Okay, so is that the screen showing nicely? It's been mute.
you can share what you want because we stopped sharing the
Yes.
infographics presenting
Okay,
the project.
you can't see my my screen then? Yes.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Let me see why that is. We're obviously connected. Let me go back and see if I share it again.
In case we have your presentation, so you can, okay, it's working. So you can just
There we are.
show the slides you
That's
would
it.
like.
So
Yeah,
is that
everything.
okay?
Yeah. Yes.
Good. Excellent. Good. And we'll start again in 2 minutes.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, I think we can start then. Can everyone
Yes,
hear me?
Richard, please. Yes,
Good.
yes. We can hear you and see you very well. Also the slides. So we can restart.
Good, thank you. Okay, just before I start on the second half of the program, is there any really urgent question that you don't want to lose the moment to say, because maybe in 45 minutes it's gone? If there is something that someone wants to ask, I'm happy to spend a couple of minutes just answering that, or if not, I can go straight through. So can I ask, is there anyone who has a burning question they need to ask? Okay, we'll carry on then. So, my screen is frozen. Oh dear. So, the concept of digital eco-innovation. This is the definition. Innovative application. Remember, it's got to be innovative all the time. It's not just one-off. It's got to reduce natural resources. That's the eco bit. It's got to decrease the release of emissions, and it has to be across the whole of the life cycle of products and services. There are various trends in the sectors. There's improved advanced manufacturing practices. We could look at public transportation, there's mobile technologies, digital payment systems, e-commerce, smart grids and waste management. And I'm sure as individuals, as you go about your daily lives, you interact in some way with something on that list. Maybe you use public transport, maybe you use your data services on mobiles, maybe you buy things through e-commerce on platforms. Perhaps you have solar power generator that sends power back to the national grid when you're not using it, and perhaps you've got good recycling facilities for disposing of your household waste. So it could be at any level. In public transport, of course, there are some modern ideas, rapid transit systems, electric vehicles, intelligence systems that try to optimize the actual travel, and modern railway networks. And of course, this is great as concepts, but each one of these takes serious investment to achieve. Certainly in terms of a modern rail network. Many of the networks are not up to date. They have difficulty in accommodating new rolling stock, new ways of powering. Intelligent transport systems, well, there's those countries that have metros, have underground systems for moving about. They've had intelligent systems for some time in being able to schedule the movements of the various trains that are running underground to optimize the time that they are available. Electric vehicles, there's a growing pressure for that. People want them, but they don't want to pay for them. And they want electricity wherever they happen to be stopping. And so this is a problem. In the UK, we've just downgraded our target for electric vehicles again, as it became politically difficult, and in terms of finance too. And we don't have the electrical charging places, the infrastructure everywhere, whenever you need it. So people have to think, can I make it to the next one? Where is the next one? Before they start their journey. There's a lot of things to overcome. And all this has to happen because to get investment in an electrical network of electrical charging points around a country, any country, the people doing that have got to be fairly confident they're going to get rewarded for doing that people will be using them with electric vehicles. So it's a chicken and egg, which comes first? And government has to step in for some of these things. The same with the rapid transit systems. They all require cost, they all require money, and every country in Europe has got pressure on its budgets, not just as a legacy issue from the pandemic, but also from the conflict in Ukraine, and of course the constant threat of mass movement of people from different parts of the world into Europe. And that hasn't even begun to start yet. Countries in Europe feel that there is a lot of immigration, a lot of threat coming, but it hasn't really started because millions and millions and millions of people not only are on the move, they're on the move in their own on the continent in Africa, but that's going to become more and more widespread. I remember I once went to Bangladesh to calculate the number of people that would be under threat from rising seawater, rising sea level. This was many years ago, and it I calculated that 17 million people would have to move. There would be no alternative. They had to move. And the government took that, hasn't done anything with that. And I went back a few years back and did the same calculations and looked, and it's now 45 million people. And that's simply impossible now, because you can't move that number of people. So there's a real problem there. In Tuvalu, in the South Pacific, in their strategy, they have to move. They have to vacate the islands. There is no possibility of people who live on Tuvalu staying there. And their ultimate migration will be to Australia, with whom they have close ties, and they use the Australian dollar as a currency anyway. But that's moving a whole country's population and finding livelihoods and integrating them. It's huge, and we haven't even begun to see that sort of stuff happening yet. Mobile technologies and data services. We expect in Europe to get a signal wherever we are, to be able to do whatever we like on our phones at minimal cost. And that is going to increase. There's a great growth there because we're becoming more and more dependent on it. I can't park my motorbike in the railway station now without, excuse me, having to go online and buy a parking ticket. It's free for motorcycles, but I still have to get the ticket, and I can't get it without going online, and then it comes out of a machine, and it means I can park. We're tied into this, and we'll be becoming tied into it more and more. We're beginning to see digital innovation in healthcare, in doctors and medical services using artificial intelligence to look at data and to predict when cancers might occur, and predicting increasingly what the risk is in an age group for certain kinds of health issues. We'll see that more and more, and that is a business. It's a growth area. There is business to be had, but it needs to be people need to be aware of it, and it needs the infrastructure, because of course, and it needs fail-safe infrastructure, so that when the signals go down, there's other signals that can come up, because we're becoming increasingly dependent on digital innovation for our stuff. And we saw over the pandemic in Europe, we saw more delivery services being done, and we'll see that more and more. We'll see drones being used for deliveries. We're already seeing it, but it will become far more common, and unfortunately, it will be very common in warfare. Waste management technologies. There are many of them. They've always been there, but they're taking on a new resonance now. Waste to energy. We've had that for some years. They're becoming more efficient. However, we need to think, do we actually need to produce any waste at all? Do we need waste to energy? Hopefully it will become redundant. Mechanical recycling is very antiquated, and hopefully through artificial intelligence, recycling will not be mechanical. It will be done by machines, but not by humans, and it will be done with more accuracy. We'll start to see that. We'll start to see that data drives the waste collection more efficiently. And interestingly, in reverse vending machines, that's where you take your used can, your drinks can, and put it in the machine, and you get a token which incentivizes you to do that. Well, back in the day, many years ago, we used to have bottles of milk and bottles We still do have bottles of milk and of pop and other drinks. And we used to go to shops and we get them refilled. You could buy alcohol, beer, locally, and just take a bottle, take your cup even, and get it filled. So some of the old practices are being revamped in a new way, because those practices, whilst they might have been old and appear old-fashioned, were actually just right. They were appropriate. But in our race to become super efficient and trendy and throwaway, we tended to lose sight of that, and now we're going back to that. And that's good. Opportunities and challenges. Opportunities, well, we have got rich resources. We need to make sure they survive. We need everyone who has a business and uses resources that come from nature needs to understand the impact when it buys its materials. We're hearing terms like a growing technology ecosystem. An ecosystem was invented by ecologists, of which I'm one, and I didn't invent it, and it was invented hundreds of years ago, or at least a couple of hundred years ago, and it was to describe animals and plants living in their habitats. But it's a nice trendy word, and it kind of gives some kind of glamorous nature to technology, and they've embraced it, and so we've all got ecosystems of technologies now, and that's part of the innovation framework that we operate in these days. We take what were words which had an original meaning, and we reuse them, and if that inspires people to adopt new practice, then that's not a bad thing. We just sometimes need to know what we're talking about when we're talking to other people, when we start using the word ecosystem, because some people might think one definition and some another. We need to look at waste generation. It's going to be increasing. In absolute terms, it will increase because the population is increasing. I remember when I was doing my population course back at university, we were told that the population of the planet would never exceed more than 7.5 billion people because it would become self-regulating. Well, of course, we're now told that we're going to reach 10 billion, possibly before 2050. And that's the UN statistics. And they have underestimated when we would reach 8 billion and 9 billion in previous years. So it could be an underestimate. 10 billion people is a lot of people, and they want stuff. They want they want all the things that people want. And there is a thing here. When we are talking about poverty and we want to help people in poverty, of course, it's a good, humane thing to do. And we raise them out of poverty, which again is wonderful. We also raise the next economic tier above them and the one above them. And so when we raise people out of poverty, we're raising people up generally and to have more disposable income with which they buy stuff. And they know what they want to buy because they have a mobile phone and they see what's all the latest things that they can have. And so we will see waste being generated on an ever increasing scale. There's a business opportunity there, both in designing products to minimize waste, but also in utilizing the waste as it is produced. But to help that, we have to have the right policy framework by government. And there's no alternative to that. Businesses can only go so far if people will buy their products. People will only do that if they feel enabled to do that, and if they're incentivized. So policy framework by governments will be needed. Digital transformation we will see as people look at their analog systems, their analog methods of production, and start to transform them using artificial intelligence, using machine learning. That will become ever more the case. And there's great risk in that, because if we look at the right-hand side, the challenge is we have to have strong governance. And the governance of AI systems, developing AI systems at the moment, is extremely weak. It's a Wild West, really. It's a free-for-all. And a lot of governments are relatively concerned about that. But also, technology companies want to do the best that they can. And the AI has got great potential. It can be a real boon in productivity. Quite a lot of this presentation was supported using AI systems. It helps. It can make you more productive, but it comes at a cost, and not necessarily a financial cost, but a risk. There are security concerns as we go increasingly online for our digital transformation, for our digital eco-innovation. There are security concerns that people can get access to your systems and so on. So there's a business there in cyber security, but the risk is that cyber hacking grows at a very, very quick pace. And of course, there's the markets. The markets have always been volatile about what they want, and we'll see that more and more. And the policy and regulatory barriers tend to be slow. It requires time for policy and regulations to be drafted, to be approved, to be put into law, to be implemented, and to be enforced. It takes time, measured in years, unless one is in an autocratic society where that doesn't necessarily matter. There are also social and cultural barriers. There are people who don't want to turn on their computer and talk to a digital doctor. It might be a very nice, friendly digital doctor, and in time, we will not be able to distinguish a real person from the avatar that we have in front of us, because the innovation will be so good, and the machine learning that's behind it will be so good that, to all intents and purposes, we're talking to a real person. But some people will want to walk to their local surgery and see a person with legs and with arms and who appears to be breathing. They'll want somebody who can relate to them as a person. So there are social and cultural barriers, not just in healthcare, but in many things. And we can expect people to become antisocial in that regard and not want that. There are, of course, economic and financial barriers to doing some of this stuff, because it needs funding, it needs finance. It just doesn't need the tech or the intelligence or the creativity to do these things. It still requires infrastructure, perhaps networks and other things, and it needs funding and money, and there may be barriers to that. And there may be infrastructural barriers. So you can't just transform if China came along and said, here's a great new rail network, it's all ready to go. We broke it down into pieces. You can just take it and pay for it. It's not easy to do. In the UK, it's very difficult because we're a small island with 30 million people more than is actually sustainable in the true sense of the word. We can't just take up our railway lines and do that. It's absolutely impossible. And by the way, in terms of sustainability, at any one time in this country, in my country, in the UK, we have 6 days of food available. On the 7th day, if there isn't food coming in from either your countries or other countries further afield, we run out. We have about 3 days of fuel, and then we run out. It's all reliant on the system continually working and producing. And once there's a hiccup, it's very, very difficult. So there are infrastructure barriers to creating change. And in terms of supply chains, in terms of sustainability, you want the supply chain to be as short as possible. You don't want to rely on fancy stuff coming from Taiwan or China or Japan or from Germany if you live in the UK, or you want to be able to have control as a business of your supply chain. And that's a message that needs to be put across when you're doing your training, that the circular economy helps to reduce the dependency on supply chains, which is a good thing for business, as people who experienced the pandemic found out. The policy and regulatory frameworks, they're important. I keep saying this, but they're absolutely crucial. Businesses will only go so far in implementing a green and digital manufacturing. People will only go so far in supporting that change. There will need to be regulation and policy, and there are hurdles in that, because perhaps getting a circular economy going is not the most important thing to governments today. It certainly isn't the most important things in France, or perhaps even in Germany. So there are other pressing matters. We're not the only game in town. So we have to recognize when we're doing our training that we're talking about this aspirational, wonderful stuff, which is all possible, but real world realities come into play. And we need to recognize that so that we can relate to people that we're training. Inconsistency of implementation and enforcement. If you've got one government that says, right, we're changing to electric vehicles, and no electric vehicle, any electric vehicle comes in, it's got to be affordable, etc., in the country, and people in the UK can't afford the ones that are made in Britain, they will have to go abroad to get their vehicles. That makes no sense. We've got to think all the time when we're implementing and enforcing how things are going to work in practice. And we need to incentivize and subsidize. People need incentives. When I was doing my political activism, I do it on a lesser extent now, I used to go where the people were. People were shopping in the village. I didn't hire the village hall, which was 3 kilometers away from the shops. I didn't hire that. I set up a store with shelter for when it was raining, right where the shops were. So people went past, and I could show stuff on our posters. And I provided coffee, and I provided biscuits. There needed some incentive for people to stop on a Saturday morning. There's no point doing it during the middle of the week in the village. It's deserted. People are at work. You do it on a Saturday morning, and you get them. After 12 o'clock, they've gone. They've done their shopping, and they're doing stuff. They're getting on with their lives. You pack up. So for that, you've got 2 hours in which to make a point, and you have to incentivize and subsidize that. And that's the same with business. They need incentives and subsidies. They need to incentivize their customers with subsidies, with offers, and government needs to incentivize business, and so on. These things do just not occur just because we say it's a good thing. We are economically dependent on oil, and that is a structural issue. We are changing, of course, where we can in Europe and elsewhere to solar power or hydro power, but we are still heavily dependent on oil and gas. And whilst we might replace oil with gas still emits emissions. It's better, but it's still emitting them. It's a bit like resource efficiency and sustainability. One's not sustainable, but one is resource efficient. It's better, but it's not sustainable. There are high upfront costs to change. When you want to get rid of your car to buy an electric car, you might have to spend more than you would have wanted to, but you do it because of the benefits down the road of cheaper power, of cheaper running costs. But you still have to provide the upfront cost. The business is the same, though on a greater scale. And people have to get access to finance. to be able to do that. People do not just have bags of money in their pockets waiting to spend. It's based on loans and grants and so on. And there are risks and uncertainties. When you buy an electric vehicle, you need to be certain you can get to everywhere you want with little risk of you not being able to recharge. So there are risks in business in changing to a circular economy. Will the customers like what we do? Will they buy this innovative product, which is better than anything they've ever seen before? But that doesn't matter. If people don't buy it, it stays on the shelf. And it's the same with services and how you provide services. Constantly innovate. McKinsey is a good example of constant innovation. They're management consultants. They're constantly thinking of new ideas and new ways to take your money as a consultant. And that's your constant innovation is really important. And recognizing the risks and uncertainties that go with that is equally important. We need people to understand what we're doing. There is low public awareness. If I go out into my village and ask what's the circular economy, one or two people will know, some won't. And if you talk about, well, it's about doing things better, producing your products and your services in a better way that's better for the planet, and they'll say, is that going to be cheaper then? Because that's what matters. Once it works, if a product works and is as good as the old product, then the next thing is it cheaper? Why should I change? Because people are inherently resistant to change. Apart from those who take up technologies rapidly because they like stuff like that, a lot of people are resistant to change, which is why we need incentives to go to electric vehicles. Also, we need to understand that skills and capacity to do things are limited. We always thought back in the day that you train to be an ecologist and you'll become an ecologist for life. Well, you may not be. Things change. You may train to on different electrical systems. Well, those systems have changed over the years, and you have to constantly rechange and as this program, upskill and develop new skills. One can never, ever relax thinking, well, I just know everything I need to know about this topic. Tomorrow you will not, because somewhere in China or America or Canada, they will have produced a new paper with new ideas that you didn't know about. So you constantly reinvent yourself and your knowledge, and you have to constantly adapt and have capacity. And as trainers, you're the prime example of updating your skills and updating your capacity to deliver new messages or repackage stuff that you've done before, but in a new, exciting and aspirational way that people want to get involved and think about it. And we need technical know-how. We need to understand how to use an app, how to use a checkbook where you write a check instead of using money. Things will go out of use and they'll become more and more digital. And the older generation, which is an increasing cohort of our population, will be very resistant because they literally do not know how to do stuff. And they're more concerned about which part of their body aches when they get up. Will they ache in a different place from the day before? How will it affect how they pick up their cattle? How they put on their socks, whether they can put on their socks. Simple stuff like that affects people's ability to function. And there's a lot of older people, and that affects their ability to do anything else, to understand anything which is new. And that's a genuine concern that we must be cognizant of. So the change to new technologies will inherently be slow, because we have to deal with people's ability to change and businesses' ability to change. There are infrastructure barriers, of course. Power. We're used to having power, the press of a button. We need to ensure that if we're going to renewable, we will have a supply when we need it. We need to ensure that we don't overreach ourselves. We go at the pace at which we can sustain our business. And that's a message you need to get across. We can't advocate everyone changes to renewable energy if it's not readily available or it's super expensive that it puts you out of business. The same with internet connectivity. You need the most powerful broadband that you can get these days. You can't have enough. And what we're using now will become as bad as using analog a few years back. We need more as apps become more and more sophisticated, as we all become more and more sophisticated, as we go away from this very two-dimensional way of presenting things to where I appear in your individual offices or rooms as a hologram, very realistic hologram. That might be the stuff of Star Wars, but it's not very far away. It will happen for sure, because it's only a question of creativity, connectivity, and machine learning to recreate our images and to be able to talk face to face. The learning experience will be super powerful, but it'd be very different from what we're doing today, where you're looking at me through a screen and at the moment, I can't see you because my screen and my presentation is filling my screen. So we need infrastructure to be able to go on, and there is a deficit. As we change, infrastructure changes slowly. It has a big capital cost that maybe goes for 40 years. When you build a new power station, its lifetime is 40 to 50 to 60 years. So we have to wait for these things to become redundant and obsolete before we can change. Otherwise, we'll continue paying loans for that infrastructure and we're not even using it. It's like paying for a car that you've got rid of for another 2 years on your loan when you've got to buy a new car and you're paying for 2 loans. It makes no business sense. So examples of what we're going to see in the factories: energy efficient smart technology. We're going to see lots more sensors, lots more data. We're going to look at AI controlling and monitoring our energy consumption, optimizing the manufacturing process. Our manufacturing processes will not stay still. They will change, or to try to reduce waste, to minimize renewable energy usage, and to minimize the raw materials. It will all change and it will start to improve week by week. We will start to adopt, and we already are, of course, 3D printing with sustainable materials, where those materials coming from, how they've been produced. We use 3D printing because it produces far less waste, produces almost no waste, has a very low carbon footprint in terms of emissions, less resource intensive. It's all good stuff. And one day, perhaps, we might see hubs, industrial hubs, mini hubs in every community with the ability to produce most products, because we will download a plan, some software, we will buy in a lump of stuff, and we will be able to produce a teacup to our own specific design, which matches our kitchen and our table and everything else. We can foresee that coming. It will change businesses and manufacturing beyond measure. We're seeing that already. We also are seeing digital twins. This means that we create virtual, that is on computer, of the manufacturing systems to see how they will work. So we'll see, for instance, race cars may not be the best example in terms of using fuel. However, we'll see race cars being designed and tested on a computer and never seeing a wind tunnel to look at the airflows. It happens now to a certain degree. We'll see simulations. That will happen more and more in ordinary businesses, creating predictive tools to help us understand and model the consumer community that we're designing for. We'll take survey data and artificial intelligence systems will take data from lots of different sources and understand how our own business idea might work. We will have advanced technologies that enable factories to do everything, to recycle and almost have nothing that comes out. and very little coming in. It will be a virtual circle. We'll start to see that. But of course, as products are made, then we have to import some materials to take that place, of course. And we'll use predictive maintenance, artificial intelligence-driven predictive maintenance systems to reduce downtime, both of our own systems in our factories, but also of the products and services that we are providing to our customers. And it will reduce production errors. It will identify errors on the production line or inefficiencies. Our assets, everything that we've got in the factory, everything that we own, that we use, that we have in, will be tracked. We will know where they are, what they're being used for, if they need changing, if they need servicing through sensors and using blockchain technologies, which are secure, so that other companies cannot hack into your own systems. All this will be used to change the factories of today into factories of tomorrow. And we will trade in a different way. We're already trading now in terms of marketplace. I haven't made back in the day when I was starting in consultancy, I would physically visit people. I would go into London and spend 2 or 3 days visiting oil companies there, or visiting the donor agencies to generate work. I wouldn't dream of doing that now. It's not necessary. And also, those people don't want me coming like that. They'll have a Zoom. They'll receive my information over the internet. They don't need to have me physically in their space where they have to offer me coffee and a biscuit and use up their time. They don't want that. And so increasingly, we will change the way that we sell our products, we sell our services. We will have design, creation, innovation. We will design for modularity. In other words, we can take bits apart. You and me, we can take bits apart and buy the part that we need and stick it in, and what we bought will keep on going. We don't have to throw it away or try to get it repaired at a cost that's greater than the cost of buying a new one. Well, recyclability will be built in automatically, and it will be easier to take apart. I gave the example of BMW. They try to make it so it's easier to disassemble. And that's the problem with electric motorbikes. I have a motorbike. When I was a student, I've still got it. It's a Triton 650. It's a Triton frame with a Triumph engine. And it can be taken apart completely and repaired completely. It's been going since 1968. And it's as good as new. And the electric vehicles are beyond my comprehension. I have to send it. It's basically a computer on wheels. I have to give it to somebody who connects it with a computer like cars and does fancy stuff. I'm not sure that's a great thing. So there is a balance between these things. However, certain appliances, fridges, other things that we need, we want to be able to replace the basic parts of those ourselves, and that will start to change and become easier. AI will start to optimize everything, from the way that we buy our products, we do our processes, we send out our products, and we retrieve any used products. AI will be optimizing all that for us, and it will be in our offices, it will be on our factory floor, it will be everywhere. And we will use digital twins for circular manufacturing to see whether an idea, a creation, an innovation is actually worthwhile. We will be able to simulate it and decide, well, that business isn't a good idea, that business proposition is a good idea, without having to try it, without having to go out on the streets and do market surveys, without having to ask people. Would you like a diary with these numbers of pages combined with a mobile phone? Do you like that? You won't do that because you'll be able to simulate that with the digital twin. So we have to look at the whole business of resource efficiency, of optimization, of using sensors, technologies, and the whole thing is changing. How you communicate, how you do your training will change. Ways to optimize the use of natural resources, natural materials, is to what we can substitute with other materials. Bio-based plastics, recycled materials, plant-based fibers. What can we use? We'll have a digital twin technology for process optimization to ensure minimization of waste. We'll have closed loop systems. We'll be looking at strategies to optimize everything. And all that will be controlled and guided by artificial intelligence systems and by the Internet of Things, where the sensors are online, and we can access whatever we need whenever we need. And we'll be printing more and more with 3D printing, where we minimize the amount of material that we use. We'll be using smart energy management systems. We'll be fully renewable one day, and we have to optimize that as well, because renewable energies are renewable, but it's based on solar, which is sunlight, and wind, which is variable. They will become more efficient, and they'll be used in terms of solar. They'll be able to use and are different parts of the spectrum. Wind turbines will become more efficient, but there'll be a social, cultural issue to overcome in deployment. We need to fully integrate renewable energy with smart grids so that everything is seamless. At the moment, it's not, but that will come, and we need to adopt that in terms of developing our own circular economy. And energy storage systems are much better than they used to be. We have access to batteries that are much more efficient than they used to be. They are the size of a small bathroom. They're coming down in size, and they always will in size. I remember when I had my first mobile phone, the battery was the size of a small printer now, and the dial, the handset sat on top. I remember I was using it, and I walked into a restaurant for an evening meal. I was doing surveys, and people gathered around me and said, "Make a phone call. We want to watch you make a phone call." It was unique. This was back in 1984. And now I have more power on my mobile phone than sent the astronauts to the moon. And we all do. So size will come down. It will change. We need to adapt and take on board new ideas. Renewable energies will become more and more on site rather than through the grid. That will become more available. And we'll be using the digital twins and our energy efficiency AIs to do better all the time. And as trainers, we'll be able to look at what AI can do for us now. And that's possible. I've got 7 more slides, which will take me to another few minutes, which will, because I'd anticipated starting at 9:30 rather than at 9:40. So I intend to finish on time. Water recycling and reuse. There'll be closed systems. They're already there. They'll become better. They'll be optimized. We need to be careful what we are releasing into the environment. And water companies need to take that on board, because certainly in the UK, they're pretty dreadful at that. So businesses need to ensure that their clients are supported. So when they help their clients with services or products, that their goals and their circular economies are being helped by your products and your services. So it's not just about you, it's about your clients as well. And we'll have internet-enabled water monitoring, everywhere in real time to identify leaks and inefficiencies. The UK is dreadful for leaks. We use, oh, it's a frightening story. Everything was really built in 100 years ago. We're having to replace cast iron pipework that's leaking, and it's very expensive and disruptive to lives, and it's a real problem trying to retrofit, and businesses will find it difficult to retrofit for circular economy. It's the same principle. We have to suddenly decide we want to change. And in terms of using software to test things, test whatever it is, we will use software to test it rather than in practice. We can use rainwater harvesting for industrial use. I have a 12,000 litre rainwater harvesting system here in my house, or near my house, to try to minimise the amount of water I take from the national grid. Businesses and companies will try to do that. Of course, they'll be restricted by their location and their context. If they need water of a particular purity, they'll have advanced systems to enable them to do that, and that will become part of the circular economy change process. There'll be vertical manufacturing facilities to minimise the amount of land that's being used, reducing the footprint, trying to go up rather than horizontally. Before even building somewhere, there are geographical information systems and AI tools that help to analyze and identify, in terms of where your customers are, where the best location is, and where your resources are, where the best location is. So it can help you start right from the first principles, not just when you've got a building. Of course, that's difficult. If you're already stuck in a place, then you have to optimize where you are. And we'll integrate green spaces into our buildings and our offices, because that improves worker well-being. We work better when we're surrounded by nature. We will design manufacturing facilities so that we can optimize our floor space. So as our manufacturing facilities have to change, they're easier to change. It's not difficult. If we try to take out old industrial processes and plant now, it's very, very difficult. But in the future, when we build a factory for production, we'll build it in modular units, we do at the moment, so that it's easy to replace as we develop our expertise. And zones will combine different kinds of practices. So we have industrial parks that have not just got manufacturing, but we've got renewable energy on site. We've got research and development centres and water treatment and a whole range of different things, all on the same location. So there's lots of partnerships, and circular economy works in that fashion as well. So I think I probably mentioned this already. We will try to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by adopting renewable energy. Carbon capture utilisation to try to capture those emissions is probably for the very large industries, and is only at this stage in not just concept, but it's in its pilot stage. It's not readily available yet, but we will see it become available. And we'll see more and more energy efficiency machinery being powered by AI and with sensors connected to the internet, so we can monitor and optimize all our processes in real time. We will try to not use hazardous polluting materials. We will replace those. We will develop alternatives to taking materials from the nature, and we will try to recover the products that we produce at the end of life. And we'll use digital twins and process optimization as far as possible. So we've covered circular economy and its principles. We've covered the concept of digital eco-innovation. We've looked at some examples. We've looked at current practice. not best practice. I'm coming to that. I'm going to have 2 minutes on that. Optimizing the use of natural resources and reducing harmful substances. So my talk is over, but current practice, please, whenever you train or say, never, please, ever use the word best practice unless you actually know it is. Because best practice is tomorrow's current practice or good practice. It doesn't last. And best practice often isn't. Just because someone says, oh, this is best practice in making sugar, it may not be. Who says it is? Because if it's best practice, it has to be independently verified. It has to match a standard. Otherwise, it's just you or me standing up and saying, oh, yeah, the way I developed this PowerPoint presentation, I adopted best practice. It's meaningless. So never, please, ever use best practice. It's not. Best practice doesn't exist. It exists for a microsecond and then it's replaced by something else that's occurred. Use current practice. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just going to try and stop sharing if I can find how to do this.
Oh, no problem, Richard. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. Okay, fine. You have stopped sharing. So thank you very much. Thanks a lot for this inspiring, very intense session of today. It's always a pleasure to following you. So we will share your presentation with the participants in the next days through our webpage. So stay tuned because we will send you a follow-up email with all the information and instruction to access further deepening resources. Thank you very much for staying with us during this first of our upskilling program for vet professionals of the Exceed project. I remind you that the second session is foreseen for next week on the 12th of December from 9:30 to 12:30, 3 hours with breaks, of course, just to rebreathe and refresh. We will have 3 keynote speakers, the representatives of the ESCO team, so the ESCO database, then Isabella Ladrona Arroyo from the European Commission, presenting us the so-called Digital Credential for Learning initiative the European Commission is developing and carrying out. And then last but not least, a presentation of the Europass platform for the release of the micro credentials for learning. So we will switch, let's say, into competencies, European database for competencies, and how the ESCO database can represent a resource for vet providers, vet organizations, up to the release of certification schemes through digital credentials for learning, as I said. So looking forward to having you also for our second session next week. We will send you a recap via email as always. So thanks a lot to all of you and have a great day ahead. See you next week. Bye. Thank you, Richard.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Thank you.